Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Wonderful Walks in Golf podcast.
Really excited to dive into this one. Dante, we talked before we got on. I'm an architecture nerd, so this is just right in my wheelhouse. I'm excited to dive in. We have a golf course architect who's really, I think, hit the scene recently and for all the right reasons. Christine Fraser is doing a lot of efforts to change the way we look at not only golf course design, but the way we look at golf course architects as a profession as well. So, Christine, so excited to have you on the show. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. When we talk about golf course architects in general, I think let's start there. I've listened to different podcasts and different discussions you've been on in the past, and it's always a funny, discussion back and forth of like, what is a golf course architect, and how folks determine, oh, I'm a golf course architect. For you, you've been in it long enough now where obviously I think it fits and it is you, but when you were first coming onto the scene, like what made you look into golf course architecture and say that's what I wanted to do, be a golf course architect?
Yeah, I played college golf down in Florida. It was a Division One circuit, and after those 4 years were up, I wasn't really good enough to keep playing golf, so I had to find a different endeavor. And I'd always been really interested in the establishment of golf and where I fit into that, and what it was going to look like moving forward. And I read this really cool article about how an old gravel quarry was turned into a US Open venue. And it just kind of clicked in that moment of like, wow, that's something that I want to pursue. And that's how I got the golf architecture started to really come to the forefront of my mind. I moved away from competitive golf and into more of the creative side of things, and started to pursue it at that time.
Yeah, I love to see that you have, kind of a basis in more of like the art side of a degree before you went down the landscape architecture path.
Mhm.
When you decided to go from more of that like art background into landscape architecture, I see a lot of correlation between art. I mean, I studied architecture at a liberal arts school, and I see a lot of the correlations between the two. Was the jump difficult from like the art background into landscape architecture, or how was that kind of to blend into what is, your profession at this time?
No, I think it was all part of a process that led up to this decision. And when I applied to the master's program, the landscape architecture program, you had to submit a portfolio, and you had to compile some really artistic pieces, whether that's like painting or drawing or music or whatever it may be that you feel comfortable putting into your portfolio. That kind of creative element was really um, encouraged and valued in the program. So I feel like it was a pretty seamless transition.
Yeah, I always admired those who could paint. It was one thing that always plagued me through through college. It was like if we got to that portion, it's like, oh man, I have to do that. And as much trial and error as maybe it was just my perfectionist kind of kicking in, but I never felt like anything was good enough to me to like say, oh, let's put a stamp of approval on that for whether it was portfolio or like final presentation.
Yeah, totally. And that still like applies to what I'm doing today, is that, artistic pursuit of perfection that doesn't exist, and being okay with handing off a project when you know it could be better, and really valuing your time and your time input into a certain project, because, it could just go on forever.
Yeah, I'm super intrigued on that, and I want to put like a post-it note on that for a little bit later to get back
Sure.
into like how that's perceived when it comes to an actual golf course design. But like sticking with that transition from art to landscape architecture to out into the real world of actually designing golf courses, you took a unique path after you graduated, which I want to touch on, and I think is super impactful to how you have a mindset on the game today. You traveled across the pond and did some research overseas, including the Scotland area. What made the decision to go to England and really pursue an in-depth dive of golf courses over there?
Yeah, I met someone who would become my mentor, Martin Hawtrey. is a legacy architect. His grandfather started a firm. His father was part of that firm, and he carried that firm on. So it's the longest standing architecture firm in the world. So there's a lot of legacy there, a lot of networking, a lot of contacts, a lot of access to some really amazing golf courses. And when I graduated, Martin had offered me a job, and I had never been to England before, and I was fresh out of my master's degree, and it was basically like such a stroke of luck and timing and serendipity, and I jumped at the opportunity. And because of Martin's exceptional standing within the golf industry and the architecture community, I immediately had access to, open venues and places like Sunningdale and, the most traditional landscapes within golf architecture that you could think of. So that was really kind of a 5 years of just a study for me of what golf could be.
Yeah, I mean, what a wild ride when you look at when you look at the golf courses, like you were mentioning, like open venues and Royal Waterloo, Royal West Norfolk. I mean, the list goes on and on. Royal
Mhm.
Birkdale. It just
Yeah.
it's amazing to me of the lineage that goes on and on of golf courses. He had a part in transforming over decades, as you said, generations even. And as you look at that too, you know, what role did you begin to play as you studied and as you learned in maybe some of those golf courses that Martin had a hand in transforming?
Oh, that's a really great question. The role that I played in the office, I don't, wow. Um, yeah, I don't know. I think I brought a different perspective to what we were trying to accomplish, and I was an outsider in a lot of ways. I'm from Canada. I'm female. I'm young. I don't have a lot in common with the clients that we often worked with, and so I think that kind of outsider's perspective of looking into this old establishment from through a different lens was definitely valuable in a lot of ways. And in particular, the sort of female gaze on a golf course, and how that's different, and how we can use architecture to address certain issues that women face on the golf course.
Yeah, I love that perspective. I think, as you mentioned, not only just your perspective of being younger, being a female. I in preparation for this interview looked up the American Society of Golf Course Architects, and it's for the 99.99% male in red like jumpers. I don't
Yeah.
know even know what you call
Yeah.
them. It's just
It's a bit disturbing, isn't it?
it's polarizing. It really
Yeah,
is to see
totally.
like,
Mhm.
okay, that's what has basically directed the golf courses we play in America for generations. And now, um,
Absolutely.
as we look at you kind of coming into the mix and bringing what is a much needed kind of rejuvenation of how we look at things. And I think that's what's exciting in the way, hopefully, we can transform golf courses in America to serve not only the community, but to serve us as players, right? Because that's at the end of the day what a golf course is designed for us as players.
Absolutely. Yeah, you got it.
So, like, as you've looked at that path of being an outsider and then bringing that back into your own firm and really running your own show at this point, I think
Mhm.
on your website is a really interesting quote that I want to dive into a little more.
Is
You
that a nice way
call
to put it? Interesting.
I can't find the right word. So the interesting it is because I think it can go a lot of different ways. So I'm going to leave it at interesting. You say your designs are a variety of bespoke architectural services. What is bespoke architectural services, and what do you think that means in like describing the way you look at designs?
Yeah, every project is different. Every golf course needs different things. Sometimes they have a setup that suits the needs of the people who are a 5 to 10 handicap exclusively, and bespoke design means pushing outside of those boundaries and those safe spaces and inviting more people to play golf who don't necessarily fall within that demographic. So bespoke means filling in the gaps of opportunities to make a golf course better and help them serve their community or their membership in a better way.
Well, I think like looking at American golf course architecture, since that's where we're based out of, and looking at golf courses across the world, it's kind of, America, as America has done for generations. They serve commercialism and like the resort style
Mm,
golf.
yeah.
How can we? And I know this is where the conversation has been a lot with like municipal golf courses across the country. How can we build back in a more community feel to some of these golf courses, or does it require us to like scrap the old model and begin looking at new ways to incorporate golf courses within communities that are already there?
Yeah, and that's I think what makes North American golf culture different is it's a business first, whereas golf, say perhaps in the UK or in other niche communities, it's a service, and municipal golf, in my opinion, should be a service to your community. And so, how do we make that transition from putting business first to putting our community first? And architecture is just the medium I've chose to kind of push that and make people consider it, and also offer like value in inclusivity and diversity to a city or a club.
Yeah, it's actually funny that not funny, but it's interesting that you say that, because we actually had Brandel Chambly on the show not too long ago, and he's working on a project with another architect, Pisa, in regards to building with the whole TPC players. And,
Hmm.
if you're not playing in the tournament as like a male, and in the players event, you can't play, TPC Sawgrass. And like, you know what, we're going to design a TPC Sawgrass like course and a players like event for the women. And one of the interesting things that really stuck out to me in what Brandel said is the fact that there are courses that are designed specifically to one gender,
Hmm.
or, like his point is Augusta National is not, even if you put the tees forward when they have the Augusta Women's Amateur, it's not built for them to play that course. And
No.
he's saying that there's so much data that goes into it, in regards like how, like what's the next step to take, you're looking at courses that, like you said, developing for scratch to 5 handicaps, and how do you incorporate that to the male, and also incorporating more courses designed for uh, female and other genders, and even possibly disabled golfers and disabled veterans. How do and what's the strategy that incorporate all of that to be able to
Yeah.
throw that into a course design while sticking to the mindset of community?
Yeah, it's really complicated and it's very difficult to design a golf course that suits the needs of everybody. But that's kind of what I'm trying to do, and it's a process, and it involves asking people what they need and inviting those marginalized communities to the center to really explain their experience, explain how what they're trying to get out of a round of golf. And it's not like shooting 2 under. Oftentimes, it's working on your physical health or your mental health or spending time with your friends and family. So there's a lot more to golf than just the game, and that's kind of the angle that I take on it is how do we use golf to make people better?
Yeah, that's awesome. And you said like experience, like we always talk about that on the show too, is like we go to destinations and we play these um we're going to Palm Springs in January, and we've been down the Winter Park, and it's completely two different experiences, and you
Yeah.
kind of hit the nail on the head there. And it seems kind of from our taking here and kind of your experience, and the time you've spent overseas as well, and your comment towards the fact that, which I really liked, is over across the pond, they say, is the fact that a lot of the courses are more generated towards not the commercial aspect, more for the people. So,
Mhm.
and you say experiences and reaching out. How do I develop a course? Well, mainly it's on experiences. One of the things I'm intrigued about is what type of experiences can we see from, people playing something like St. Andrews that we can bring back from there and incorporate it in the courses kind of within the United States.
Yeah, St. Andrews is probably the most well-known municipal golf course in the world. And what makes St. Andrews really special and valuable and worthy of emulation is that your 90-year-old grandmother can go out there and play around and have fun and be equitably challenged. And then it also challenges the best players in the world. And so that's what we're trying to attain is allowing people access to the golf course in different ways that suits their needs. So the best players can go out there, have a really fun, exciting, challenging round, but also we're not penalizing people for being, bad golfers.
That's awesome there.
We talked about it, Dante, you and I talked about it right before we hopped on here, of just like the vast, I guess the word I'm looking for is escaping me, but the vast like difference in folks that can actually experience the golf course, whether it's playing it or just like St. Andrews of just, on Sundays they shut it down and it's a park,
Yeah.
right? Like how do we really navigate that conversation in the US? Because up until today, it's really one or the other, right? Like we find these polar opposites of not really being able to mesh them. And I think as we navigate an issue in the US of land conservation and water conservation, it really starts to beg the question of like, why aren't we mixing the two? And I think obviously that's where Christine, folks like yourself and designers across the world are navigating complex issues like that, of how to really blend them together. What do you see just within your worldview of how architects across the world and maybe even yourself are navigating that issue of this conservation conversation?
Yeah, and I don't think it's enough just for a golf course to be a golf course in terms of its land consumption and water consumption and natural resource consumption. I think it needs to be more than just a game. It needs to provide something for the community. It needs to address, mental health issues. It needs to be inclusive of people with adaptive needs. Or else I don't think it's like you can't justify just having a golf course for much longer. It has to be multi-use. It has to be something more than just golf. And when you mention, like shutting the course down on Sundays and allowing people to use the property as they want, we just got a new puppy and I want to play golf and I want to take my dog. And everywhere I call, they're like, are you fucking insane? We're not bringing your dog here. Like, no. But if you go over to the UK, there's not a golf course that you don't see a dog on. And it's just part of the experience. And if people want to bring their dog on the golf course, they're allowed to, because you know what? It's not a big deal. They're not going to wreck your greens. Everyone still has their proper dog etiquette that they follow. It offers something to the community of dog walkers. So that's like a really kind of small, tangible example of how a golf course can be more than a golf course to make it worthy of keeping.
Well, and I think you hit the nail on the head. It is small, it is tangible, but if you look at it, and we laugh, but if you look at it, and then like you said, you start dialing numbers across the United States, and you get called absolutely absurd for even contemplating the idea. And I think at there, begins a whole, tip of the iceberg of the root of maybe even some societal norms that we've got to start changing too. And I think super interesting to kind of build off of that idea of like, all right, let's take our dogs to the golf course. Let's relax a little bit, have fun, enjoy ourselves and our family and our community. How does maybe designing more community-based golf courses, I think one of the interesting things that you touched on your website was how to design with budget in mind to keep the cost low for people coming to the golf course as well. Because I think, especially here in the US, we hear the conversation all the time of, golf's just too expensive to even think about getting into in the first place. How do we start designing to help folks with that hurdle as well?
Yeah, I think this is a really important topic, and it's important to know the correlation between sustainability and bottom line and how that is passed on to the consumer. So within the next 10, 20 years, you're going to see the price of water like skyrocket if you have access at all. If you're lucky enough to have access to water, it's going to be really expensive, and the people that are going to pay for that are the consumers in the long run. And so it's important to understand how using less water is valuable to the bottom line, to not undo all of the work that we have done in the past few decades to make golf more accessible. And additionally to that, municipal golf is really important because of its accessibility, and because of its design and location. It's often really easy for new golfers to go out and learn how to play on the putting green, on the short course, on the par 3 course. So municipal golf courses are so valuable in that respect. And unfortunately, we're seeing them struggle because of the value of land, and that's kind of what I was alluding to earlier. Of if it's just golf, it's not going to be valuable enough to justify having a golf course. It's going to be turned into low-income housing development or a shopping mall or whatever it may be.
Yeah, the unfortunate truths of kind of where we're at as growth in society, right? That land just continues to become more and more of a value add versus a spot to put a golf course, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Building off of that too, and looking at, okay, so we're saying we got to have a golf course that's not just a golf course. You mentioned using traditional architectural concepts to design these golf courses. What does that mean, right? Like, I think a lot of us as like standard golfers are like, oh yeah, traditional golf course concepts. We know that it's A, B, and C, but like
Yeah.
at the true root of it, what are these traditional architectural concepts that start to get used when looking at designing a golf course with that in conception in mind?
Yeah, that's exactly it. I'm definitely not revolutionizing golf architecture. I'm using really basic tools within the architecture repertoire, but just applying them in a different way, applying them to people who traditionally haven't been considered on the golf course, like women, like seniors, like juniors, like people with disabilities, with mobility issues, with visual impairment issues. So you think about like walking into a clubhouse, you have your standardized architectural measurements to allow people in a wheelchair to access the clubhouse. But as soon as you step on the golf course, all of that is gone. So it's like applying standards to the golf course to allow people with disabilities to access all of the tees and access all of the greens by looking at the slopes, removing any stairs, or at least allowing an alternate route to access the tee. And it's also just like considering how people with slower swing speeds navigate the golf course. So, and oftentimes that's along the ground. So the ground game is really important to consider. So these are really basic architectural tools that originated in Scotland because, there wasn't always irrigation is a really kind of a new concept in golf. There was not irrigation in the 1901 when a lot of these golf courses were being built. So the ground was firm and fast, and people had to bump and run the balls into greens to make sure it held the green. So those are traditional architectural concepts that I'm just reapplying to water consumption and to people who bump and run and to people playing the forward tees.
As a golf nerd and like a architect nerd too, I think the fun in that conversation is, what are we going to get back to? What older concepts are we going to see kind of move their way back into golf if this is the way design kind of goes back into, right? Like the focus on making water go where we want it without having to dig up trenches and channels and everything, right? And that's, I think, I could go on for hours, I think, in that conversation alone of just how to do it, why we're doing it, and what's going on there. But I'll save that conversation for a longer discussion, maybe
Episode
another day.
2.0. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Episode 2.0. But like rounding that all back up to what you're seeing now and the work you're doing currently, what do you see immediately within the next 3 to 5 years of being at the forefront of like things that we're going to see come to fruition? Is it just that of what we talked about, or are there things that people are requesting now that you don't think will be around in maybe a decade?
Yeah, I think water is the most valuable resource that any golf course has, and we're going to see water become more valuable than it already is, and we're going to have to figure out new and different ways to harvest water and capture water and store water and reuse water, because it's not always going to be a matter of just turning on the tap.
It's fascinating to think about, right? Because we go to the store for water, we go everywhere. There's water right at our fingertips, and to
Yeah.
think of that not being just a common everyday occurrence is something that I don't think a lot of people can even conceptualize or wrap their head around.
Yeah. Yeah. I have experienced that, trying to convince golf courses the importance of preparing for the future with less water and what that means for the golf course. And think about your own golf course. What's that going to look like with access to half the amount of water that it currently has? And we can get into a whole other conversation of managing consumer expectations of when the turf browns and firms up. That's okay. We all have we have lawns at our house. They're not perfectly lush green lawns all year round. Turf has a life cycle that it goes through seasonally. It goes through drought. It goes through dormancy. So just accepting more of the natural life cycle of turf, and there's value in brown turf is really important.
That's funny that you say that, because we kind of see that here, kind of in the southern, where I'm at in southern New Jersey, is a lot of these courses, they want it green. They don't care kind of if it's more saturated than it should be, but they want it green. And most of the golfers who play more regularly and some of the more experienced, because I mean, I'm not gonna lie, we're kind of right in this area where you drive maybe an hour and a half to 2 hours. You're in North Jersey, pushing Long Island, and then you got Philly, you got the outskirts of Philly. So you got courses like Marion. I mean, I'm 40 minutes from Pine Valley. Like, I'm in this bubble, but around like all these prestigious, I have a lot of money type golf courses, and there are guys that go out and they play like local stuff and play some of these higher end golf courses. But there's some around here that like, well, we consider ourselves a good golf course because we're green. Well, that's not necessarily the case.
That's the only measure of standard to,
I mean, we play on
quality of golf course. Yeah.
Half the time I see it turn brown a little bit, I'm like, yo, this is awesome. I mean, we're drying out a little bit here. Like
this is when the fun
firmer.
starts.
This is where I can
hit shots
rip one
that
low.
Not used
Exactly.
To. Yeah.
It's like, oh man, this will play the course completely different from what I'm normally playing. Is, and you're hitting your drive, and next thing you know, it backs up. Like,
and one of like
inches.
the best things about playing golf is like the variety that different playing fields offer. And if we actually like take that one step further and allow the golf course to evolve throughout the season, now we have 4 golf courses in one, because in the spring you're hitting driver off the tee. When it's firm and fast in the summer, you're hitting a 5-iron. You're having to think about your angles more. It just becomes much more strategic and fun.
Which just I love being able to, like, obviously, American golf has kind of turned into more of a bomb and gouge mentality, driver wedge. I mean, Dalton can attest. I love going when we play like the shorter courses, where obviously I'm not the longest of hitters either, but when we play a shorter course, I love the variety where I can still take like a 4-iron off the tee, and then Dalton takes like a driver off the tee, and deciding on how we want to play that specific hole, we can still walk out with the same score, no problem.
Totally. And like, go play the forward tees at your club. Switch it up. It's fun.
Yeah,
one of our most best, I think, all around experiences from sun up to sundown. We did a 100-hole hike with the Maryland State Golf Association this year, and we played it from the forward tees the whole day. And I think it was the most fun him and I have both had, just experiencing it, because you don't do that. I can't remember the last time I ever, quote unquote, like teed it forward like that. And it got us both thinking, like, let's do that way more often, because that was too much fun to not.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, kind of going back to what I just said, in that example right there, Dalton was ripping drivers all day, and I was just pulling a 4-iron and just hitting it low and just letting it run, just because, I mean, again, it was a little bit different because we wanted to carry less weight. So we had minimum clubs in our bag. Yeah. But that was also fun too, because you got very creative as to, our goal was to walk and play 100 holes within the daylight that we had.
Yeah.
And after the first round. I think we had 14 clubs in the bag, and luckily the parking lot was right in the middle between hole 18 and hole 1, and we walked right to the car and dumped half of our clubs back into the trunk and just didn't see them the rest of the day.
I'm tangenting now, but the original rules of golf only allowed you to have like 7 or 8 clubs, and I find it so interesting to think what golf would look like today if that rule had stayed the way it was instead of 14 clubs, in terms of like encouraging people to walk more and being much more accessible, because you don't have to buy 14 clubs. You only have to buy and carry 7 or 8. And in terms of like being more creative with your technique and hitting different shots and making 7 clubs do the job of 14. So it's just an interesting kind of idea.
I think if they stuck at the 7 or 8 clubs, the what's in the bag videos would be absolutely, I guess you can say, just like you said, it would be more personalized rather than seeing every Titleist player have these same driver, 3-wood hybrid or iron down the wedge, and then the 4 wedges. And that's where what's in the bag videos would really come into play, is
and it would
if
really
you stuck at the 8 clubs.
Yeah, totally. And it would separate, the good golfers from the mediocre golfers in a really quick fashion.
The true shot shapers will make their presence.
Oh my gosh, the creativity we had to come up with when we did finally dump half our bag in the car and just like make a 7-iron work from 140 instead of just ripping it from 165 or something, in between. All those in between yardages that just, they spawn creativity when you have no other option.
Yeah, if you take anything away from this podcast, put 8 clubs in your bag, go play the forward tees, and let me know about your experience.
We second that wholeheartedly.
We did it 5.5 times. That we played 5.5 rounds, so we did it 5.5 times in one day, and it was awesome to see, because like specific holes. I mean, I think there was one point where I told him, I said, "All right, we were coming towards the end, and we were just like, we got to just keep put one foot in front of the other." And there was a point I think I just grabbed my 7-iron and played that for 5 holes straight. And that's the only club that I use. I was like, all right, well, let me see if I can off the tee, either, like you said, like rope hook one low and try and get it to run up. So I had like a full 7-iron in, or lay off of it to where I can have that 7-iron.
Totally. Exactly. Thinking about your next shot to
exactly. Yeah. And then I kind of did that, and then I said, screw it. And I chose other clubs, but it was fun. I mean, it was cool to see. It was cool, the experience. And again, It goes back to, we're playing forward tees. Luckily the course, I would say, was more traditional style. It was pretty flat land, and anybody can really easily accessibly play that specific course that we played. And we played the forward tees, and it was a lot of fun switching it up and pick and choosing which shot and club we wanted to hit off the tee based on the minimum clubs that we had.
Yep. It's awesome.
It brings the brain into play way more often. And I think that's the fun of golf, right? It's just like, how creative can you be shot per shot? And I think when golf course architecture starts to lean on that, right? Like forcing you to do that or making you think, that's the fun of it. That's why we all play golf, is to have that like little brain test throughout the day and have some fun, get creative, let the fun out a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. A good measure of success is if I've made you think off the tee. And if I've done that, that's a job well done.
I love that. I think I said I'd put a post-it in it. I think it's a perfect time to bring it up. When you say about a job well done and success is making us think off the tee, right? How do you go into these golf courses or go into these conversations and convince maybe some of the old style, or old-minded golf courses that, hey, I'm the right fit for you? And how do you bring that to life, whether it's like 2D design or these 3D renderings or drawings? How do you kind of wrap this piece up of a great golf course design and put it in front of someone to say, you know what, we're going to believe in Christine to make this happen?
Yeah. I think about that a lot, because I'm slowly becoming in a position to really like pitch my ideas and put myself at the front of at the front door and knock really loudly and say, you know, my ideas have value and here's why. I can easily tell you about the ethical value of becoming more diverse and inclusive, but here's how it'll affect your bottom line positively by inviting more people to the game, by extending the lifeline and the lifetime of one particular member by starting earlier and playing later into your senior years. So there's an easy way to show that there's actually financial value and sustainability in these decisions. And then it's just, you know, secretly I'm on the side just being like, it's the right thing to do.
Just pick me. I promise I won't let you down, right?
Pick me. Yeah, it's tough. I mean, it's hard to pitching for jobs is a really interesting concept, and I'm interviewing for jobs, you know, constantly, and it's, you know, it's my face, it's my ideas, so I try not to take it personally, but that's sometimes hard for me.
Yeah, I think, and like the unique thing about golf course architecture and as opposed to like other industries, right? You're not just interviewing in a region or like a certain area. You're really all over the world. And I think that plays such a unique role into how golf course architects in general, and especially you know, you have the complexities of fitting into the local area, but maybe playing off of, you know, other golf courses around the world to make this one full piece come together. And I think that's the enamoring part about what is golf course architecture from us who sit on the sidelines is how you guys do everything from top to bottom, and complete a full package like that.
Yeah, well, I'll do my best to try to make it look easy, but it certainly is not.
Never easy, I'm sure, but always a gift when it all does come together and you get to see a final product.
Yeah, absolutely. That is really, really satisfying, fulfilling.
Well, Christine, we appreciate the time. Where can folks head to either learn more about you, learn more about the golf courses you've had an impact on, or just kind of follow along in your journey on this ride of golf course architecture?
Yeah, I'm not the best at social media, but I do have a website that I'm really proud on and that I've worked hard on. It's christinefraserdesign.com, and all of my contact information is there. So if you're a young girl thinking about getting into the golf industry and architecture is any of interest to you, send me an email.
Awesome. I love it. Again, Christine, thank you for the time. Inspiring, I'm sure, many women around the world to get into golf course architecture, which is an exciting time, and an exciting time to see how your designs are going to impact not only our generation, but future generations. So thank you again for the time. And as always, guys, you can go to www.enjoythewalkpod.com to check out our latest blog posts, our latest podcast releases, and more.